मेरी आवाज ऑडिबल सर है?
मॉर्निंग सबको।
हम शुरू कर लेते हैं। लाइव हो गया कार्यक्रम।
सर एम आई ऑडिबल?
हाँ जी।
ओके ओके।
IQAC माता सुंदरी कॉलेज, दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी, महात्मा गांधी काशी विद्यापीठ और शिक्षक प्रशिक्षण केंद्र डॉक्टर हरि सिंह गौर केंद्रीय विश्वविद्यालय सागर के संयुक्त तत्वावधान में आयोजित इस संकाय संवर्धन कार्यक्रम में आप सबका स्वागत है। तीसरे दिन के प्रथम सत्र में आज हमारे बीच प्रोफेसर बाला गणपति जी हैं। इस सत्र का संचालन करने के लिए मैं निवेदन करूंगा डॉक्टर जोली सिंह से। जोली सिंह जी दर्शन शास्त्र विभाग माता सुंदरी कॉलेज में सहायक प्रोफेसर के पद पर कार्यरत हैं। डॉक्टर जोली सिंह।
Thank you, sir. A very good morning to all present here. I, Jolly Singh, welcome you all to the first session of the third day of the Faculty Development Program on Indian Knowledge Systems, Concerns, Approaches and Applications in New Education Policy 2020. Today we have with us an eminent scholar of philosophy, Professor Bala Ganpati Devrakonda, who is going to share his views on the topic Indian Knowledge Systems and Tourism. He is a professor and former head Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi. His areas of interest include social and political philosophy, Buddhism, historiography, philosophy of religion, human rights, and philosophy of yoga. Professor Bala is a certified philosophical counselor by American Philosophy Practitioner Association. He is also Vice Chancellor's nominee of UG and PG Board of Studies in Philosophy of Department of Philosophy, Pondicherry University. He was recently involved with the project Yoga Consciousness in Mahabharata, the ethical value for societal political well-being. He is guest editing a special issue of Philosophical Practice. As an active member, Professor Bala is associated with many professional bodies like Indian Philosophical Congress, Council for Research in Value and Philosophy, International Society of Philosophers. He has 3 books to his credit. Recently, he has published with Springer a book entitled Philosophical Doctrines of the Andhakas. He has published many articles and papers in renowned journals like Hinduism in Thailand, its presence and absence, impact of disruptive technology on higher education, role of Guru as an interpreter of Dharma, to name a few. Sir has presented many papers at various national and international conferences and seminars like Religion and Creativity, Aesthetics as a Solution to the Crisis of Contemporary Religion, Periodization and Conceptualization of Indian Philosophy in the International Seminar on Building Bridges between Latin American and Italian Philosophies, and many more. Professor Bala has been invited for many special lectures at various institutes and organizations. Sir, thank you on behalf of the organizing team to accept our invitation to be our resource person for today's session. I request you to kindly address and enlighten the participants with your words and ideas. Over to you, sir. I welcome Professor Bala Ganpati.
Yeah. Namaste. Thank you so much, Dr. Jolly, for that kind introduction. And I also thank Lokesh ji for this program and invite or beginning the session. Professor Harpreet Kaur ji, the principal of the college, and other colleagues who have joined here from Mata Sundari College, especially Dr. Lakshmi Vats and Hamalata ji, Dr. Hamalata and Dr. Jolly and other colleagues who have joined from Mata Sundari College and other various colleges around the country, and also people who have joined us, as the organizers from Mahatma Gandhi Kashi Vidyalaya, Teaching Learning Center from Hari Singh Gaur Vishwavidyalaya. I thank you all for this kind invitation, and wonderful colleagues and the dear participants who have joined us. I'm sure all of you might be having a good time these 7 days, 14th to 20th of September, because the theme is very intriguing. Indian knowledge system concerns and applications in National Education Policy 2020. Basically, had it been the case that it is only on Indian knowledge system, then there were many which were organized since long. So, but the present FDP tries to address the concerns which are involved in this Indian knowledge system with reference to our own time, and also the approaches that are existent, that were existent, and that are existent now, and which are to be developed in future, and also how we see the place of Indian knowledge system with reference to national education policy. Most of us do argue, saying that yeah, national education policy has given a lot of scope for Indian knowledge system to be reinvigorated or represented in a better way than it was presented before, etc. So how is it possible, and what are the implications of that is very interesting to have a look at. And I'm so happy that all these three institutions have come together, Mahatma Gandhi Kashi Vidyalaya and Harsing Gaur Vishwavidyalaya and Mata Sundari College, to address this particular concern, which is a timely one. I really appreciate the efforts of the organizers in this regard. Now, coming to my point that I am asked to talk about, which is Indian knowledge system and tourism. So it seems to be really intriguing in the sense that how do we place both of them together? Because tourism, we understand it from various perspectives, and considering that, keeping that in mind, how do we relate these two, and how do we talk about them is the concern. It is not that people did not talk about it before. People did speak about that before, but my conception is slightly different. In fact, this talk is an outcome of two brief articles that have published in Economic Times. Okay, if you're looking at this newspaper, Economic Times, I have written on knowledge tourism, two articles that I have published on knowledge tourism, and this talk is a response to that. In fact, Amalata ji, probably she might have read these articles, so she asked me that I should relate Indian knowledge system or the theme of the FDP to what I am working on now, and try to present it. So that is how I'm thankful to Hamlata ji for pointing out this interesting convergence and asking me to speak about that. So the point that I would be speaking now is I have divided my lecture into 4 or 5 parts. Okay, in the first part, I would talk about the limited understanding that we have with regard to Indian knowledge system. Sorry, knowledge system in general. Okay, sorry. I request our friends to mute their mics. Okay, please.
राजीव जी आप म्यूट कर लीजिएगा प्लीज, हम लोग बार बार म्यूट कर रहे हैं.
I would. Yeah, probably you should mute all of them together. Yeah, I would initially talk about the limited understanding that we have of tourism, and then I will also talk. I will also.
Sorry sir, लोकेश जी आप सबको म्यूट कर पाएंगे?
Yeah, you mute including me so that I can.
Not you, sir.
No, I'm saying I can unmute myself. No, that.
Okay, that way.
कर दिया सर, कर दिया. आप शुरू करें.
जी sir.
Thank you. So initially, I'll begin by explaining the limited understanding that we have of tourism, and then I'll proceed to the contemporary tourism, diversity of contemporary tourism, because most of us do not know what is happening in this tourism industry. But once we look at that, it's so fascinating. Contemporary tourism discourse is so fascinating, and also its practice is so fascinating. So I would be talking briefly about that, and then I will get into the concept of knowledge tourism that I am trying to advocate, which may not be new to many of us, but which is to be reconceptualized or conceptualized in a proper way. And then I will also talk about the tourist as a knowledge seeker. Okay, tourist is not mere a vagabond, no, is somebody who is just going out and looking around, but he is also a seeker. Okay, so that aspect I would touch upon, and then I will give some suggestions with regard to how Indian tourism can develop as a knowledge tourism. So these are the four aspects, 5 aspects that I have to speak about. Let me begin with the first one that I'm interested to talk about, tourism and diversity of contemporary tourism. Friends, if we look at, most of us have a commonsensical understanding of tourism, right? We may not be specialists in tourism as a discipline, but all of us have some conception of what tourism is, because we are also at one point of time tourists, right? We do go around and we explore the world. So that is how we do know what is tourism. But I'll give you this commonsensical, limited perspective of understanding of tourism that is existent now. And you can also correct me. I don't deny that this is the kind of definition, but this is a limited kind of perspective that we have, where we look at tourism in its limited perspective and understand it to be visit of a traveler. Sorry about this noise. Visit of a traveler to a dead historical fact for enjoyment, since it is well connected by road or air, or through transportation. Okay, so this is the commonsensical way of understanding it, and we will not have any problems with this kind of an understanding of tourism. Okay, where we try to understand that it is a visit by a traveler, an individual who is traveling to a place, to a dead historical fact, and then why is he going there? For the sake of enjoyment. And why is he going there? Because if it is not well connected, he will not go to such kind of a place. If it is only well connected, then a person would go to such kind of a place. And why? For the sake of enjoyment. And the place is a historical fact that was existent. Okay, and this is how, in general, it is understood in a limited perspective. But my perception is that contemporary tourist is no more, and this particular definition that I have given, limited definition that I have given, makes or tries to view the traveler to be an innocent and ignorant fellow. Okay, ignorant person. So that is what I have problems with. So contemporary tourist is no more an innocent and ignorant traveler. Rather, he or she is an intelligent, inquisitive individual equipped with communication technologies that provide instant access to the information regarding the places, accessibility, recreation, and relaxation. So don't let us not assume that he is a innocent, ignorant person. No, he has all the facilities of looking at the place and searching all the details. So why is he going there then? Okay, even after getting the information, because he is only getting the information, even after getting the information, he still wants to go there, or she still wants to go there and see the place. Okay, so the assumption that he is an ignorant and innocent traveler is to be kept away. No, that should be corrected. And also, he or she, the traveler, makes a willful choice of visiting the place and expects sufficient satisfaction for the money and time spent. Because in traveling, it is not just your money it is not just your time that you spend, it is also the money that you spend, your hard earnings that you spend. So obviously, the tourist in such kind of in the process of tourism expects complete satisfaction of what he is spending, both time and money. Despite limited accessibility, the traveler will visit the place that he has chosen. Even if there is no accessibility at all, even if the accessibility is limited, even then, if you choose to visit a place, you don't care about that, no accessibility point. You still go there and try to enjoy the place and try to experience the place. Okay, that's what I wanted to stress here. The place of visit is not seen merely as a dead historical fact. Okay, whenever you decide to go to your place, you don't see the place of visit to be merely a dead historical fact. Rather, it is perceived as a space of confluence of the past and the present. Okay, remember one thing: whenever we go to tourist places of historical significance, we see them to be a confluence of past and also the present through the knowledge, okay, which provides a living embedded experience for us. This is very important to me. That is how it leads to knowledge tourism. When you go to a historical place, you are conceptualizing or visualizing the past, and also you are experiencing the present, experiencing the past and the present, and that is how there is a confluence of past and present that happens. Where does it happen? It happens in the living embedded experience of the individual traveler. So this aspect is to be more deeply explored, so that the tourism industry itself transforms itself into a different kind of industry. As of now, friends, those who are acquainted with tourism industry understand that tourism is driven by industry in the sense that the big hotels and big tour organizers decide what is the place that you should visit, and what is the place that is popular, and what is the place that you should not leave out from your itinerary. So these are the things which are decided by the corporates and the big hotels and the travel agencies. That is how the industry driven tourism that is existent now, it tells you that it is accessible, and that is how you tend to go there. Okay, it tells you that you can just go there in 2 hours and come back. And finally, they also chart out a plan of action. This place for 1 hour, this place for 1 hour. Okay, so that's how they try to take us around and finally leave us there. And at the end of the day, what is your experience? Your experience is only the travel rather than tourism. Because there is a interesting author, I forgot the name of the author, who makes a distinction between travel and tourism. And he says tourism is an industry and travel is willful action of the individual to go around and see the places. And we should go for travel than tourism, which is already decided by the industrial or corporate houses. Okay, so keep that in your mind whenever you try to travel. So, but this is the background with which I'm going to speak now. When we look at the contemporary tourism, we find wonderful diversity around us. Okay, diversity in the sense that on the basis of the places of visit, tourism is variously categorized as religious tourism, or historical tourism, or nature tourism, and medical tourism. Okay, there are so many forms of tourism that have come into existence in the contemporary discourse, which try to address, which try to focus on the place that you want to visit. So if it is a if you're a religious seeker, then there is something called religious tourism, which makes you move around temples and religious places of significance. Similarly, historical nature tourism and medical tourism. Medical tourism is of a relatively recent kind of one, which means it's almost 10 years old. But still, I would say it's a recent kind of one. And there is another kind of distinction that we find in tourism. It is to attract the tourists across the globe, okay, from different dimensions of tourism. Different dimensions of tourism have evolved in terms of responsible tourism. Okay, see, the first one I spoke about, the focus is the places. Here, in order to attract different kind of groups of people, another variety of diverse form of tourism has come into existence in the term in terms of responsible tourism, inclusive tourism, participatory tourism. I'm sure all of you must be aware of these, and you might have read or heard about them as well. For example, when people talk about responsible tourism, what they try to hint is while making the local host communities of the tourist places and tourists accountable to each other. So in responsible tourism, what happens is responsibility is the key word, and they try to make the tourists as well as the local host communities responsible to each other. Okay, they try to connect each other in such a way that both of them contribute to the ecosystem that is existent at the place of visit. Okay, so this also there is a underlying thing that comes up in this responsible tourism, that it calls for minimizing of the negative social and environmental impacts, because of late people have understood that tourism is also destroying the ecology. Okay, tourism in fact is the major cause in most of the serene, beautiful tourist places. The tourism is the one which is causing deterioration of environmental serenity. Okay, so in order to avoid that, this responsible tourism has come into existence, where people try to talk about accountability of local community, the communities and the tourists to each other, and that is how tourists also become accountable and try to uh, generate revenue for the local communities, and local communities in turn provide space so that they can tourists can have lived experience of the place where they want to go. So which means that local kind of a experience that they want to provide. So this is responsible tourism. The other form of tourism that I have mentioned, inclusive tourism. This is another very interesting and fascinating area, and many articles, much research has been done in this area. In this inclusive tourism, basically there are certain places of tourism which are not accessible to everyone. For example, say if you have a baby, some of the places are not accessible, because the prams will not be allowed into every place where you want to go. Similarly, if you have old parents at home, then you cannot take them for tourism. And if you have physically disabled people with you, then tourism is not so inclusive of supporting them in tourism. So addressing such kind of aspects, now inclusive tourism has become very popular, which tries to give space for uh, give accessibility, provide accessibility for differently abled and aged people, and empowering them to come forward for new experiences. Because basically, we go to a tourist place for a new experience, and depriving certain kinds of people from experiencing, having this new experience is wrong. That is how they try to be more inclusive in the recent times to provide access to even the people who are in general not allowed, to access these places. And the other one is participatory tourism, which is also similar to responsible tourism, but where it is more like authentic experience of cultural tourism, for the economic benefit of both local host communities and the tourists. So these are the various kinds of, this is the kind of diversity that you see in the contemporary tourism around us. Okay. So now the point that I would like to make is this diversity that you see around in the contemporary tourism helps the tourist organizations and institutions to cater the needs of diverse groups of tourists in the best possible way. So now, when I map this contemporary tourism, you think that, yeah, everything is taken care of. No? The people who do not have access are provided, and the people who are trying to spoil the nature are given a chance to like participate in the place and then have a good experience. So that is how everything seems to be perfectly ordered and by the corporate houses and the facilitators of this tourism, either government or private agencies. Uh, so this is the kind of picture that we get of contemporary tourism. However, I have certain observations with regard to this, the whole scenario that we have around us. There are certain very intriguing aspects that we have to take note of, okay, in this tourism. that I have presented, which is the contemporary scenario. It concentrates, this tourism industry presently concentrates only on material or factual remains. Okay, that is the first point. And the second point is it focuses extensively on service sector industry, because industry is the one which wants to survive. That is how it takes historical fact into consideration. Okay, it is only for the survival of international tourist industry this historical place is given its whatever due importance or extra importance, and something is not given importance at all because it is not accessible. So keep that in your mind. So the focus is extensively on service sector rather than what actually is there in that place. And the third point is it works continuously on issues of connectivity. I have attended a couple of government meetings. Okay, everywhere, government and private sector, when they come together and discuss, most of the discussion is about connectivity, nothing else. Okay, they don't care about the experience that the traveler has to get, because of which he may feel like visiting the place again and again. It is not that if you're a traveler, it is not that you would go to the place only once in your life. Sometimes it is also true, but if you like the place, you feel like going there. No, that longingness would be there in the traveler, which makes you go again and again to the same place. So in order to provide such kind of an experience, they want to make it merely a visit to the place. No, I would always say that, yeah, I have visited, because whenever I go out, people ask me whether you have seen Taj Mahal. So I have to tick it saying that, yeah, I have seen Taj Mahal. Okay. But what is required is the experience of going there within me, which has to give me that feeling, right? And also it should ask me to come back. So such kind of an experience we don't is not facilitated by these people. Of course, an exception is, as I was telling, responsible tourism. Responsible tourism purely tries to provide experience-oriented kind of one, responsible tourism. Okay, so these are the certain observations that I have, and I'm not saying that these aspects are not important. No, concentration of factual domains is not, and focusing on extensively focusing on service sector, or discussing or encouraging connectivity is significant. Definitely these three aspects are significant. However, one must not, one must remember that these are characterized by materiality and services. Okay, because finally at the end of the day, we are only limiting them to materiality and services, which are prone to change and deterioration as they are temporary and seasonal. Okay, so these aspects are temporary and seasonal, and that is how they are prone to change and deterioration. So, okay, if that is the case, what is it that we should do? So this is where I started talking about knowledge tourism, because something that is eternal or understood to be eternal or understood to be staying for a long time, is knowledge, because you cannot disown the knowledge. Along with the tangible that tourism excessively focuses, the intangible that that is embedded in tangible is very important, which is to be projected in a proper way, which is slightly missing according to me. Okay, I'm not saying that it is completely missing, but it is slightly missing, and its articulation in a strong way, profound way, is what is required. This is where I don't feel it out of place to talk about tourist as a knowledge seeker. As I said before, um, 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 Dr. Jolly, please let me know if I'm crossing my time limit, because I'm used to 2-hour lectures. So if I'm,
सर
just tell me.
सर 8:30 तक है सर, 8:30 तक है, आप 8:20 तक लेक्चर दीजिए, फिर उसके बाद क्वेश्चन है.
So I have 20 more minutes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. There are two aspects that I want to concentrate. One is tourist as knowledge seeker, and then looking at the Indian knowledge system in terms of a tourist knowledge system. Okay, these two aspects I'll try to cover in 10 minutes, and then we can have the discussion. So the first one is tourist as a knowledge seeker. As I said in the beginning, The tourist is not an innocent and ignorant person. Okay, there are various groups of tourists, and one group could be a casual traveler. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you can categorize everybody as a casual traveler. Okay, casual by casual traveler I mean somebody who just goes there for the sake of going there. Tick mark in your list of the places to visit, as I was saying before. But friends, in this knowledge tourism, knowledge seeker, tourist as knowledge seeker is very important, crucial aspect. That is how I would spend some time on this. You look at the human beings. We are all human beings. Humans are essentially curious beings, and tourism grew from such inquisitiveness. Otherwise, we would have stayed at the place where we were, from the beginning, times immemorial. We wanted to know something. We are curious. Human being is a curious being. Okay, even animals, most of the animals are curious, right? So this curiosity is the one which pushes you to come out of your own place and go to the other place and see and observe and gain something for yourself. Okay, so tourism grew out of such inquisitiveness. Though a human being lives within specified surroundings, his curiosity prompts him to transcend his habitat and know the places and people beyond his confinements. Okay, so that is how your house, your confinement, your house, you're comfortable with it. You try to get out of this comfort zone and go to a new place. Why do you do so? Because of your inquisitiveness. Okay, such a quest leads one to keep up an outward journey to quench the inner thirst of the knowledge. Okay, this triggers the inquisitiveness of the individual to move beyond the known to reach out to the unknown. Friends, this is a very important point that I would like to mention here. We think that we are happy with the known, but as human beings, we are never happy with the known. We know something, but are we happy with the with whatever we know? If we are happy with whatever we know, then we would not be sitting here in FDP. We would not be going to the classes. We would not be reading the newspapers or watching the channels. No? So all these things basically tell us that there is a movement continuously on the part of the individual from known to the unknown. Okay, so the unknown, the call from the unknown is more strong for the individual, and that is what creates inquisitiveness in the individual. That is what prompts you to go out and see the places, have a new experience. Okay, so this movement from known to the unknown is very important to me. The unknown inspires. It is not the known that inspires us. It is the unknown that inspires, instigates, and prompts the individual to travel. Okay, the quest for the unknown can be satisfied. Okay, the quest can be satisfied by information, knowledge, and experience alone. Okay, it is not just information. Along with information, knowledge also must be there. Along with the knowledge and information, experience also must be there. Only then this inquisitiveness or this quest that you have to know something gets satisfied. So these three aspects I'm stressing here: information, knowledge, and experience. Okay, it can be satisfied in a limited way by information or knowledge of others' experience. Sometimes we may say that, yeah, I read a travelogue. The travelogue gives you information. Travelogue also gives you experience of others. But will that be sufficient? No. But the confluence of one's own knowledge and experience is the one which gratifies the individual. So the gratification you get only when it is your own experience and knowledge. The combination of information and experience alone is an incomplete one. Okay, if you think that your information that you have got from the internet and the kind of knowledge that you have gained through that, that's if you think that that alone is sufficient, no, that's a wrong kind of perspective. Thus, it is the inner epistemological quest that prompts the individuals to travel and know more places and people through experience. The tourist, for me, okay, since I am a philosophy teacher, I always try to see it from the side of philosopher. So for me, every tourist is a philosopher because he has that inquisitiveness within him, or she has that inquisitiveness within her, and because of which she always makes an attempt to know and experience. No? So that is how tourist for me is a philosopher, an active conscious seeker, active conscious seeker who attempts to explore, discover himself and the world around him or her. It is not that when you go to a tourist place, you are discovering the place. It is also that you would be discovering your own self. Okay, sometimes you would also be discovering your own inner calls. Okay, your soul, your inner self also calls you for certain kind of things which we tend to ignore in the process of our everyday daily life, which can be heard only when you displace yourself from your comfort zone and reach out to a new place. Okay, that is how these tourist places really help us to attend to our own inner calls. So this whole process of explanation that I'm providing you, friends, like the epistemology of the individuals, epistemological quest of the individuals is very important. And though we don't outwardly analyze it this way, but this is what happens in each one of us when we become travelers. Okay, and this is what makes me to go towards something called knowledge tourism. Okay, when it is said that the tourist is a knowledge seeker, we are not generalizing all tourists as conscious seekers of knowledge, or all tourists only seek knowledge. We are only claiming that at least minimally knowledge forms an integral part of tourist experience. Okay, that you cannot deny. Some tourists would be conscious and active seekers of knowledge of the tourist destination, and some are passive and unconscious receptors as well. So that we have to grant that relaxation, otherwise we cannot go further. The relation between the traveler and the destination is significant in this regard. Okay, the correlation between the tourist and the destination, this is another important aspect where subject and the object come into contact. Now, the subject is the tourist and the place of visit is the destination is the object. Okay, the subject object correlation plays a significant role in the success of travel experience. In fact, the tourism industry thrives while contributing to this correlation. Anticipating what the tourist expects and making the destination suitable to the expectations is the primary focus of the industry. So industry only stops there. The corporates, big corporates that you have, facilitators that you have, whether it is government or private, I'm talking about both of them, their role stops at that level. So they cannot make you experience, they can only facilitate it. Okay, so they only anticipate what the tourist what the tourist expects, and try to provide similar kind of expectations, make the destination suitable for such kind of expectations, and that is where their job ends. This focus led to segregating tourists in terms of their expectations and the development of specialized packages that cater the needs of groups in terms of medical, archaeological, religious, and nature tourism. So this is how it comes forward. Some of the significant aspects of such a futuristic vision are to target newer groups of tourists and extend the experiences of the existing groups of the tourists, and inclusive, be inclusive in making the facilities available to the people who are deprived. Okay, so continuously, as I mentioned in the divisions of the tourism, what tourism industry continuously, its vision is deeply rooted in basically targeting the newer groups, so making it more and more inclusive, or extend the experience of the people who have already come and who would be coming back, and also to provide facilities for those who are deprived of these experiences. So that's how the tourism industry basically moves around. Looking at this whole thing, I believe that I try to establish that the tourist is a knowledge seeker. Okay, basically there is an inquisitiveness and there is an element of knowledge which is present in the experience of the tourist, whether the tourist is a conscious seeker or unconscious receptor, but there is an element of knowledge which you cannot do away with. And I also established that tourism should not be limited to the material things alone. Material is very important, factual material is very important, but there is something else as well which is to be taken into consideration. Now I come to the last part of my talk, where I would be talking about Indian tourism in terms of knowledge tourism. When we look at India, India is known for its eternal knowledge endowed in philosophical perspectives. Okay, pardon me, I would be stressing philosophy more because I'm a philosophy student. So if you are a historian, you can replace this wherever I'm using philosophy with history. It may not be appropriate, but still that's allowed. uh, so the eternal knowledge of any place, any country for that matter, I'm only referring to India here. Indian conception of knowledge is holistic, integrative, and harmonious. Whether it be a biological system that is being explained, or a sociological system that is being explained, or a spiritual system, knowledge of it always is integrated with the other systems and explained in harmonious, integrated, holistic way. In this regard, I would give the I would give the example of Charaka Samhita. Please have a look at Charaka Samhita, and it is said that it is a basically a medicine, no, or science text. But friends, you open it and read the chapters. At least read the titles of the chapters. Initially, it begins with rationality, argumentation, and then what is the composition of the biological system, which is related to other systems as well, cosmological systems, etc. as well. So that is how none of the sciences, Shastra, that you find which are explained in these classical Indian texts, or just presented as secluded, divided, uh, independent, solitary units. Okay, they were always provided in terms of a cosmic, okay, a holistic, a kind of integrative, and also a kind of harmony that they have seen between the cosmological and the biological and environmental. Okay, so there is always a harmony that is seen from the individual to the cosmic, which is established, and only through this link, further course of action, or whether it is health or disease or whatever it may be, even if it is architecture, all these are constructed that way or conceptualized that way. Okay, so for instance, if somebody was building a temple during 1000 AD, it is not that only the architecture that was taken care of or that was only looked at. No, along with the architecture, they also had an understanding of geology, and they had an understanding, perfect understanding of cosmology, because of which they could align the temples. You know, when I request you to have a look at the way some of the temples are aligned in the country. Okay, it would be surprising because then you don't have satellites which are giving you a picture of the temples, but even then they could place them in a particular line, okay, which is very important. And how did this happen? Only because they are able to relate themselves to the they are able to transcend beyond their limited perspective. Okay, and that is what I was saying is something that is holistic, integrative, and harmonious that we find in the Indian knowledge system. Uh, so, for instance, a temple is not just a religious construction. Rather, it is endowed with architectural marvels and spiritual and cosmic energies as well, by combining material, geographical, and intellectual facets. Okay, a temple constructed with a particular stone stores and reflects a unique kind of energy to which visitors get exposed, and it is constructed by taking note of the geographical, astronomical, and cosmological specifications into consideration. There are several studies coming up from various disciplines that research and present ancient constructions, whether they are temples or palaces or forts, as knowledge houses. Okay, now the research is developing in terms of looking at each one of them as knowledge houses. This is the focal point of my study, basically. So we have to look at them not as dead historical facts. Okay, a place of visit is not a dead historical fact to which you just go there and gain some information and then come back. No, they are knowledge houses and knowledge hubs. Okay, and unfortunately, we are not developing them as knowledge houses and knowledge hubs. We are only limiting ourselves to placing them as in the museum you place certain monuments and architecture marvels. In the same way, you are leaving certain kind of things outside in this open space, leaving them to their fate of deterioration and presenting them as dead facts. These are not dead facts, my friends. These are basically knowledge houses. That is how we are supposed to look at them. Researching, developing, and presenting them as knowledge hubs rather than mere historical facts with some speculative information about their time of construction and people who built it will take Indian tourism to the next level in tourist geography. So if they start focusing on developing them as knowledge hubs, then probably there will be a shift, there will be a big leap in the tourism industry towards knowledge tourism that Indian tourism must take lead of. As I basically, in my articles, I'm going to publish another one where I would be arguing that philosophy tourism as a part of knowledge tourism. You can also pick up from your own disciplines, because I understand this is a faculty development program and the people are from various disciplines. So I developed something called philosophy tourism to be part of knowledge tourism, and try to develop on that, like how Indian philosophical systems, which provided eternal knowledge, are so important for everyone. It's not just for the academic community of philosophia. No, unfortunately, we are so selfish. No, Anglophone academic philosophers of India are so selfish that they retain the knowledge only to themselves. No, where the Brahmanical criticism that you present has to be applied here as well. But this philosophy has to go to the community. Philosophy is to be known to the people around. No? Everybody should understand the importance of philosophy. Even, it's quite unfortunate. In the universities, our own colleagues will not know what is philosophy. I'm sorry about this noise, but I cannot avoid that. Yeah, sorry. Unfortunately, our own colleagues will not know what is philosophy. And if you ask them about Indian philosophy, they will only think that it is religion that we are talking about. No, it is not religion. The ignorance of philosophy is existent in the academic communities themselves. And when do we introduce philosophy to the students, younger generations? Only at the level of undergraduation, and that too when they don't know anything about philosophy. And we tell them you pick up philosophy, which is very difficult for them to do. But in fact, it has to go to the general public, and that is how philosophy must be there in the public epistemologies. Because since parents do not know, they will not talk about that to the students, their kids, and kids generation also will not have this in their epistemology. And that is how I feel once philosophy tourism becomes popular, people start visiting the places. It is this one fact that I want to stress once again is all of us are inquisitive of knowing something that is not known. So the movement from known to the unknown is the one that continuously strives us in doing research and in traveling, in teaching, in learning, everything is rooted in this broader framework of movement from knowing to the unknown. Okay, and if we can provide a space for understanding that unknown as the knowledge hub, then definitely people would have a look at this Indian knowledge system, which is endowed in this philosophical enterprise, and it would become popular. This is how I believe Indian knowledge system and tourism should get converged. And I have prepared an action plan as well. In fact, I have submitted this to Ministry of Tourism at Delhi, but they had their own reservations with regard to this. But I believe they have certain kind of schemes like Swadeshi Darshan, okay, where they want all of us to visit our own country, various places in our own country, and know about our own place. So I was arguing that when they are talking about Swadeshi Darshan, they should try to develop knowledge houses, knowledge hubs. No, say for example, if I want to take students of my master's program or even the school children, if it is a knowledge house, then they will get a comprehensive understanding of what is happening in that particular place. Okay, so that is how it has to be. Otherwise, as we see, they take kids to the Mughal gardens and move them around and then bring them back into the bus. So this is not really going to give them any knowledge at all. Of course, they will have an outward experience of the whole thing, but it has to reach the level of knowledge, which is very important. And that is how this Swadeshi Darshan that the Ministry of Tourism of India has conceptualized. It is to be integrated with the school curriculum. This is what I believe. This is my personal opinion. Similarly, we have Study India programs, which are to be encouraged to reach out to these knowledge hubs. Okay, and integrating this Study India program with knowledge hubs would also impact positively this knowledge tourism that I'm talking about. So these are some of my thoughts that I have that I thought I should share with you. I'm sorry I could not be more articulative than what I have done, but my basic thrust is to look at, or I believe that especially when it comes to India, the tourism industry has to transform itself into knowledge tourism and provide spaces of knowledge hubs and knowledge houses, so that the present and the future generations get benefited out of that. Thank you so much, and I really submit my gratitude to all the three organizations which have come together, institutions which have come together to organize this wonderful workshop. And my special thanks to Hemlata ji, Dr. Hemlata, who was continuously in touch with me and made me a part of this program. Thank you.
Sir, it has totally been our pleasure to listen to this philosophical outlook on tourism. I'm sure everybody must have enjoyed it. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an informative and enriching lecture. And Indian tourism, as you said, it is not a it is not a dead kind of thing. Rather, it is more. If we are going to reflect on this, we are going to find there is a kind of self-realization also. That is the philosophical point that you touched upon. And very beautifully, you also mentioned that visit of a traveler is not restricted, or is no more restricted to the concept of ignorant traveler. Rather, he has this inquisitive mind and enthusiasm for everything and to know more. And there is one more point that I really, which is very well appreciated, that you talked about the responsible, inclusive, and participatory tourism, which presents a kind of diversity and caters to the desire of variety of tourists. And one more point, that we have to look that we are not having this temporary kind of experience while talking about tourism. And it is important to merge the tangible with the intangible. And there is this movement from the known to the unknown, which is required in tourism. So I thank you all for, I thank you, sir, for this lecture, and which is very informative. Needless to say, because the chat box is full of appreciation, if you see. So thank you for being
here. Call Madam Chandrika Gulati.
Yes, Jolly जी,
Yes.
हम लोग को अभी समय हमारे पास एक दो टिप्पणियां सवाल ले सकते हैं ना?
हाँ, एक दो सवाल लीजिए।
House, yes, the house is open for discussion.
I would like
चंद्रू
to
का
ask,
भी सवाल है, संजय जी का भी सवाल है, और जो सवाल है पहले बोलिए था मैडम चंद्रिका, वोट ऑफ थैंक्स।
can I ask a question, Lokesh sir?
ऑफ कोर्स मैम।
It's not my question is related to the presentation, which was very, very valuable. I just have a natural, I mean, I have a question which has been bothering me for many, many years in my experience, that in many universities across the world, the few that I know of, philosophy departments have faced closures. So that's a very sad state of affairs, considering that this was the mother of all knowledge. My question to you is, I'm out of touch now. Has there been a reversal in this? Have many major universities worked ahead to go ahead with reopening their philosophy departments, or has there been some kind of a resurgence in studying philosophy? That is one. The second part of my question is that, in your opinion, though I heard what you talked about tourism and movement from home to, what can be done at our level to popularize philosophy as a popular option for people who are bright and sharp, so that they should choose this as a valid option, to make them understand how this will virtually open philosophy and maths should open the doors for investigation into almost any discipline in the world. So how can that be done? So these are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that concern that you have raised. In fact, it is the concern of most of us, and we have been addressing this concern on various platforms. In fact, after I joined Delhi University, which happened 6 years back, I have been continuously arguing on various platforms that philosophy has to be given due representation from the school level onwards in different ways. Okay, people often argue saying that philosophy is not for kids, but philosophy for children is a big movement that has come up. And my major concern from the beginning is, which you would find in the link that I have provided, friends, where Academia Edu, where you find my writings. I have addressed the point like, is there any philosophical community in India? And even if there is a philosophical community in India, what is that? It is only confined to, unfortunately, the Anglophone academia. Remaining things we don't consider to be philosophical communities at all, which is quite unfortunate, right? But otherwise, we believe from the beginning that philosophy is produced mostly, very strongly, very richly outside the academia. So since we think that we don't want to recognize that is the fault of the academia. That is the limited perspective that academia has, which is to be totally re-evaluated and reassessed. So in this regard, basically we have been, I have looked at certain aspects. One is the misunderstandings that we have with regard to philosophy, which is causing this ignorance about the philosophy. Like most of the people, even when I took philosophy during my graduation, my uncles and others have ridiculed me, saying that this guy, after say 5 or 6 years, will come with saffron clothes and a jole. That this is the kind of stereotypical perspective that people still have. Okay, it's not that that was almost 30 years back. It is, people still have such kind of a conception about philosophy, which is unfortunately unfortunate. So what we are trying to do is trying to correct these misconceptions that we have. And at the second level, there is a major concern as well from the side of the students. Since those who join philosophy do not find the avenues of getting employment. Okay, so that is also one of the major concerns. So what we started looking at is applied areas of philosophy, and philosophy of and philosophy in relation to. These two aspects are to be explored, and then they are to be substantiated, so that, see, the responsibility of the present philosophical community, academia, is to restore the relation of philosophy with the other disciplines. In fact, as you rightly pointed out, philosophy is understood to be the mother of all knowledge, and the children have come up and children have become independent, and the mother is now in the old age home. So we have to bring her back from old age home to their own home. the relational aspect is to be worked upon. Along with this relational aspects, applied areas of philosophy are to be worked upon. And that is how I have been advocating philosophical counseling since last 3-4 years, which is a very fertile area. In fact, philosophical counselors in Europe and America are paid almost $100 to $200 per hour. Okay. So that is the kind of lucrativeness that this particular profession has. But people have to realize these possibilities of getting employment and then come forward. So we are making an effort in this direction. Thank you so much for pointing out. And your concern is also our concern. We are working on that, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was very, very helpful, and I'm glad my concerns are addressed. Thank you, sir.
ब्रीफ क्वेश्चन संजय।
May I ask?
हाँ, एक छोटा सा क्वेश्चन।
जी सर, मैं आपका तो डेलिब्रेशन बहुत ही वाइब्रेंट था और हम सब लोगों को लग रहा था कि शायद टूरिज्म को इस रूप में भी देखा जा सकता है।
थैंक यू।
मैं, अगर इफ यू अलाउ मी, आई वांट टू एड्रेस डॉक्टर हरजीत के सवाल पर जो भी बात हुई थी, हरिंदर जी के सवाल पर। सर देखिए, मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि बाकी सब डिसिप्लिन के साथ भी वो दिक्कतें जो आप बता रहे हैं, खासतौर पे सोशल साइंस और ह्यूमैनिटीज के साथ जो मार्केट की दिक्कत है, जिसकी वजह से डेफिनेटली सभी डिस्कोर्स में दिक्कत आई है। पर मुझे लगता है सर, जो अगर फिलोसोफर्स जो हैं, खास तौर पर जो स्कूल एजुकेशन पर अगर आप लोग काम करें, इट्स माय हम्बल सजेशन, क्योंकि अगर आप एनसीईआरटी की 11th और 12th की बुक्स को अगर आप देखते हैं, उसको पढ़ने के बाद आप सारी डिसिप्लिन पढ़ लेंगे पर फिलोसफी ऑप्ट नहीं करेंगे। और हायर एजुकेशन में फिलोसफी की जो एंट्री है वो 11वीं और 12वीं के बाद ही हो पाती है। 9th और 10th के फिलोसफी की जो टेक्स्ट बुक है, जो एनसीईआरटी द्वारा बनाई जाती है, उसमें बहुत बेहतरीन लोग उस टेक्स्ट को नहीं लिख रहे हैं। तो अगर फिलोसोफर इस रूप में भी देखें कि वो स्कूल एजुकेशन में फिलोसफी में क्या चेंजेस कर सकते हैं, अगर स्कूल एजुकेशन में उस इंटरेस्ट को आप कैटर नहीं कर पाएंगे तो वो सारी की सारी दिक्कत आपके हायर एजुकेशन के साथ आएगी। मार्केट एक बड़ी दिक्कत है, वो मार्केट के साथ सभी लोग जूझ रहे हैं, नॉट ओनली इन फिलोसफी, इवन साइकोलॉजी, सोशियोलॉजी, व्हाटएवर, सभी सब्जेक्ट के साथ वो दिक्कत है। पर सबसे कम काम फिलोसोफर ने मेरी समझ के अनुसार एनसीईआरटी के साथ जुड़कर किया है। तो अगर फिलोसफी के लोग इस बात को जाने कि हमें उस लेवल के लिए किस तरह की फिलोसफी तैयार करनी है, कांट को डिकोड करने के लिए या किसी और को डिकोड करने के लिए क्या मेथोडोलॉजी बनाई जाए, उस पर बहुत कम काम हुआ है सर। तो अगर आप लोग इस रूप में भी देखें कि हम आने वाले समय में खासतौर पे स्कूल एजुकेशन में फिलोसफी के उस बहुत एब्स्ट्रैक्ट आइडिया को उसके लेवल के अनुसार बनाकर हम प्रेजेंट करेंगे, तो डेफिनेटली 9th 11th 12th के बाद बच्चों का एक इंटरेस्ट फिलोसफी में बनेगा। मैथमेटिक्स भी उतना ही मुश्किल सब्जेक्ट है, पर मैथमेटिक्स को ऑप्ट कर लेते हैं। पर फिर जो एक है ना कि फिलोसोफर्स का जो अपना एक वर्ग या जो भी अपना एक दायरा है, उससे उन्हें थोड़ा सा बाहर निकलने की जरूरत है। ये मेरा एक था ऑब्जर्वेशन, बाकी आप लोग बेहतर समझते हैं। मेरा सर कि आपकी मतलब आपका जो पूरा डिलिब्रेशन रहा, उसमें जनरली हम लोग टूरिज्म को खास तौर पर एज एन एपिस्टेमोलॉजी भी लेते हैं और एज एन पेडागोगी भी लेते हैं, दोनों कंसेंट में। और ये एक तरीका हो जाता है जब हम हमारे हेरिटेज को, पास्ट को, जिसको आपने कहा कि कॉन्फ्लुएंस के तौर में काम करता है, जब प्रेजेंट और पास्ट को हम समझ सकते हैं। ये जो सर अब इसमें 2 लेवल पे हमें बात करनी होगी, जो एक पैन इंडिया आइडिया है व्हाटएवर, या जो पैन नेशन आइडिया है टूरिज्म का, तो उसके अंदर हम लोग लोकेट करते हैं कि जो हमारे पास बहुत आइडेंटिफिकल जो या एक तरह से आइडेंटिफाइड जो लोकेशंस हैं, हम उसी को उसके मैप पर रखते हैं। तो जो लोकल हिस्ट्री के द्वारा जो टूरिज्म क्रिएट होता है वो छूट जाता है। और जो एक जो जिसे कह सकते हैं कि जो एक बहुत पॉपुलर हिस्ट्री का जो एक टूरिज्म है वो दिखाई पड़ता है। एक और बड़ा खतरा है खास तौर पर अभी के दौर में, वह है ई टूरिज्म। तो आप ई टूरिज्म के कंसर्न में आप उस पूरी की पूरी समझ को जो एक एपिस्टेमोलॉजी और पेडागोजी के साथ जाती है, वो कैसे हम तैयार होंगे उस चीज के लिए? अगर मैं अपनी बात समझा सका तो आपको।
Yeah, sure. So for the first point is very valid. In fact, now the work is on. We are working with various school-related agencies, and the work is on as to how to integrate philosophy with the school curriculum. It is happening now. there are discussions, and also there is a committee which is constituted to look into that by government. So this aspect is taken care of, and its work is in progress. No, it will take 1 year at least to come out. Major point that I was stressing is philosophy is not allowed, not because it is difficult, because it is understood to be irrelevant. See, that is the major problem. Mathematics is also difficult, but people have understood that it is relevant. Okay, that is how, even if it is difficult, we will force our kids to study mathematics. But unfortunately, philosophy is understood to be difficult and irrelevant. That is how it is being discarded, which is to be addressed, and which is to be properly stated that philosophy, in fact, is not irrelevant. Whatever discipline that you are studying, you are basically doing philosophy, in the sense that the highest degree is always Doctor of Philosophy. It is not Doctor of Biology or Doctor of Computer Science. No? So that aspect is to be understood, explained to the from the bottom level onwards, which is not unfortunately done. That is one aspect. The second one, yeah, I completely agree with you on the point that when the policymakers look at only the pan-Indian kind of one, but the local aspects, I think now the situation is changing slightly. Because when people started talking about responsible tourism, etc., they were giving due importance to the local tourist places as well, because they have understood that, see, if they organize a tour to Taj Mahal, it is all the same to everyone. Similarly, if they take them to a village near Shimla, then the experience is definitely going to be different. And a village near some village in Kerala, the experience is definitely going to be different. So this is definitely understood by the international travelers and national travelers as well. That is how the perspective is changing. And with regard to e-tourism, I understand that you mean environmental tourism, right? E-tourism?
Yeah.
Environmental tourism. That's where the convergence of responsible tourism and the other important aspects that I spoke come into picture strongly, which participatory tourism and responsible tourism are in fact aspects of e-tourism.
Basically, it's a virtual tourism, sir. Sort of virtual tourism.
Oh, you're referring to virtual tourism. Yes. Now, because of this COVID-19, people have moved to virtual tourism, but it is no more encashing kind of one. But they have to come down to the physical space tourism once again. So yeah, thank you so much for those observations.
Thank you, sir. Jolie, Madam se vote of thanks.
Now I request Ms. Chandrika Gulati to deliver vote of thanks.
Thank you, Jolly. Thanks, Lokesh ji, for this privilege and honor to offer a vote of thanks to Professor Bal Ganpati Konda ji on participants. I sincerely thank you, sir, for this immensely valuable presentation and valuable inputs into this faculty development program relating to the Indian knowledge system and tourism. And you very well said that tourism provides lived experiences of visualizing the past and experiencing the present, and then and that destination, more important than the destination, is the journey or the travel. And I also would say that the key takeaway is the knowledge tourism or the quest for outward journey. To start from your lecture, what lies outside or above us is tiny compared to what lies within us. So it's the seeker's inner journey or inner call that is there in undertaking the in these kinds of tourisms. So thank you, sir, once again for your so very valuable presentation. And I also thank the participants for this beautiful interactive session. And thank you, Jolly ji, and everybody else. So over to you, Lokesh ji now.
बहुत धन्यवाद मैडम चंद्रिका जी, आप देशबंधु कॉलेज में पढ़ाती हैं। ब्रिगेडियर साहब जुड़ चुके हैं, ब्रिगेडियर ग्रेवाल जुड़ चुके हैं। इस सत्र के समापन के साथ द्वितीय सत्र का आगाज करता हूं और मैडम लक्ष्मी वत्स, डॉक्टर लक्ष्मी वत्स को एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर माता सुंदरी कॉलेज, डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ फिलॉसफी को इस सत्र के संचालन करने के लिए निवेदन करता हूं। मैडम
Yes,
लक्ष्मी।
thank you so much. to
थैंक यू
everyone.
सर, थैंक
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
थैंक यू वेरी मच।
That have
Thank you,
provided
sir.
an opening to what I am writing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So please give me permission to leave.
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू श्योर सर।
Hello.
हाँ जी मैम,
Hello.
आपकी आवाज आ रही
Am I
है?
audible? आवाज आ रही है मेरी?
यस 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 जी मैम।
Okay, okay. Thank you, Lokesh. Ladies and gentlemen, with the blessings of Mata Sundari ji, I, Lakshmi Vatsa, wish you all a very pleasant morning. Today, in the assembly of learned speakers, Madam Principal, specialist faculties, and inquisitive minds, I deem it a privilege to address you all. First of all, on behalf of Madam Principal, faculties, and on my own behalf, from the organizing committee of the faculty development program, I tender a hearty welcome.
Okay.
Please mute कर लीजिए अपने आप को.
मिसेस संधू, आपका माइक।
On behalf of Madam Principal, faculties, and on my own behalf from the organizing committee of the faculty development program, I tender a hearty welcome to Brigadier Dr. Rajwant Singh Grewal sir to be Amit Sas. I also welcome all other present here. Despite your busy schedule, you have ensured to join the virtual platform is indeed a noble gesture. As we know, in the modern era, the faculty development programs are planted in the system of education to make education value-laden. Even otherwise, such lectures are most sought after by the faculties to break the monotony of usual classroom assembly, mechanical daily routine, and attendant mental boredom. Precisely for the reason, hearing number of speakers on a chosen topic becomes an unusual intellectual experience, which leaves its memories for all times to come. As a sequel thereto, the topic of day is knowledge management and educational system during early and later Vedic period. Personal or professional, as an individual or as a member of group, this topic is of concern to every individual member of society. The pure sense behind every FDP lecture is to learn as much as possible from the learned speakers who are theoretical specialists, practically experienced, and thoroughly professional. Our quest is to unveil how the theoretical knowledge contained in the topic of today's lecture is of practical importance to us in and out of our college. Therefore, the wisdom imparted and the wisdom gained in the process becomes priceless and timeless. Brigadier Dr. R.S. Grewal, a fourth-generation Army officer, is a civil engineer, and apart from serving in Indian Army, he has been head of various higher educational institutions. An alumnus of National Defense Academy, Khadakwasla, he has served as a member of faculty at the Defense Service Staff College, Wellington, and College of Military Engineering, Pune. He has been recognized as a guide for doctoral level studies by University of Madras. His more than 55 years of service includes proven track record of managing technical training institutions both in the Army and in universities. His main forte has been perspective planning, policy formulation, and plan implementation, industry-academia collaboration, developing inter-institutional tie-ups, including those at international levels, faculty development, pedagogical development, and students' relations. He has contributed papers on national security, human resource development, and higher education to prestigious journals. He is also a member of Higher Education Committee, FICCI, and has been a speaker at numerous national and international seminars in India and abroad. He has been chairman of various peer committees constituted by NAC for accreditation of higher education institutions. Brigadier Grewal has been chief engineer in Border Roads Organization in Tehran that is considered to be a logistician's nightmare. Apart from being director of Sikkim Manipal University of Technology, Pro Vice Chancellor, Sikkim Manipal University, and Director, ICICI Manipal Academy, now Manipal University Bangalore campus, he has been Vice Chancellor of Chitkara University, Himachal Pradesh, for more than 8 years. His services were recognized by the President of India with the award of coveted Vishisht Seva Medal. He has flair for languages and is familiar with English, Hindi, Punjabi, Urdu, and Tamil. He has recently authored a book entitled Envisioning Indian Higher Education. He is currently Professor Emeritus, Chitkara University, Punjab. As listeners, there are two ways open to us. First, to learn more and more of more and more. Second, to learn less and less of more and more. That being so, I leave it to you to make your own choice. Now, I do not want to stand between you and the words of wisdom to flow from learned speakers. Thank you. Over to you, sir. Brigadier Rajwant Singh Grewal, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshmi.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to interact with each other. A very interesting thing is that India has got a rich heritage, which can teach us a lot. We have a lot to learn from there. But somehow, in our national discourse, I see the emergence of a victim syndrome. We are always talking about the British did this to us, the invaders who came from the Northwest, they did this to us, they were unfair. Our history has not been recorded with from an Indian perspective, but we ourselves have done nothing or not much to record history from our own perspective, one, or to learn from our rich heritage. We have been more concerned with lamenting and crying. And I think a time has come that we leave aside this victim syndrome and start working. The other day, I was reading a book on Hinduism by one renowned author, Mr. Mishra, and I was surprised to find that there is no translation of Veds, Indian Veds, carried out by an Indian author that is available. Most of the translations of Indian Veds are by foreign authors. Now, this is a cause of concern that 74 years have elapsed since independence, and we have not been able to make much headway in this regard. And whenever we talk about recording history from our own perspective or trying to learn from our heritage, the discourse is dominated by hate and by casting aspersions on others. And with the result, we fail to learn from our rich heritage. Keeping this in mind, what I'll try to do is, and when I realized this almost for 2 years ago, I don't claim to be a learned man. When I realized this almost 2 years ago, I started going back into our history, our heritage. And I realized that there is so much that we could borrow from our past, and we could incorporate that into our present day teaching learning processes. So keeping this in mind, what I'll try to do is I'll deal with today's topic in the form of a presentation and try to make it as simple as possible so that we can incorporate it into our daily teaching learning practices instead of, I'll not talk in abstract terms or ambiguous terms. So keeping that in mind, I'll start with my presentation. And Just let me share my screen. Can you see my slides?
No, sir.
No,
Hello?
no, sir.
No, no, sir. No.
Just a minute.
Yes, sir. Now it's visible.
Now it's visible.
सर
Yes,
स्लाइड
sir.
विजिबल
Yes,
नहीं है, स्क्रीन विजिबल हो रही है अभी.
हाँ,
हाँ
अभी आ
स्लाइड
गया?
हाँ जी सर.
So the topic that I selected today was knowledge management and system of education during the Vedic era. And of course, I will try to develop on as to what is its relevant in the present era. So what I will do is I'll try to first define what we mean by the Vedic era, what is knowledge management, and then how our ancient rishis engaged in knowledge management. Education for women is also a very, very important topic because very few people know that during the ancient times, a lot of women were even given the status of rishis. And however, there is a law of nature that whatever goes up must come down. Some developments during the later Vedic period and the resurrection which took place with the Buddhist and Jain systems of education coming in. And finally, I'll try to give you the relevance to the present era. So let's come to what is the Vedic era. Now, normally speaking, it is assumed that the Vedic era started with the decline of the Indus Valley civilization, which was anything between 2500 to 1700 BC. And it corresponds normally to the Iron Age in India, which was 1500 to 600 BC. Now, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, in his famous book, Orion, researches into antiquity of Vedas, felt that the Vedic era in India was from 4500 BC to 2500 BC. And his views were endorsed by a German author, Hermann Jacobi, in his book, The Computation of Hindu Dates in Inscriptions. Our own scholar, Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, who was our first vice president and later president, he said that there is a lot of ambiguity about what is the Vedic era, but he assumed, and he said nothing can be said about certain, nothing certain can be said about it, but he felt that the Vedic era could be anything between 6000 to 2500 BC. Another German author, Max Muller, he felt that the Indian Vedic era was from 1500 to 500 BC. And he based his view on a hypothesis that the human race could not have been there before 4000 BC. And in India, the Vedic era could be set, could be set to commence after the Aryan invasion, after the biblical flood. So he gave an arbitrary time period, that is 1500 to 500 BC, which he later recanted. He felt that the Rig Veda was perhaps composed initially by 1200 BC. However, philological and linguistic evidence say that the Rig Veda was composed sometime between 1700 and 1100 BC. And the modern historians generally agree that the oldest parts of the Rig Veda were composed around 1200 BC. The Rig Veda the Vedic era is further subdivided into two: the early Vedic era, which is 1500 to 1000 BC, and the later Vedic period, that is from 1000 to 500 BC. And the Buddhism and Jainism period, which coincides with the later Vedic period. The dates which I have given, 623 BC and 529 BC, are related to the birth of Gautam Buddha and Lord Mahavira. So keeping this in mind, as to this is the time period which we are referring to as far as the Vedic era is concerned. So what is knowledge management? Now, knowledge management is the organization, capture, retention, and use of knowledge, where the knowledge could be explicit, implicit, or tacit knowledge. And the knowledge management has got four verticals. One is knowledge acquisition, where you acquire knowledge from different sources or by different means. Then you store knowledge, which you call knowledge retention. You disseminate knowledge, and thereafter you create new knowledge. So this is a technique of knowledge management, which is right from the Vedic era. It is being followed in the world even today. The corporate world especially is very, very enthusiastic about this aspect of knowledge management. And we in India have a rich heritage of knowledge management. So let's see as to how the rishis organize this knowledge management, and what role do the Veds have in this aspect. Now, the word Ved has been derived from the word Vid, which means to know. And it is said that our Veds basically contain the internal truth, which has been revealed by God. And they are vast repositories of wisdom, knowledge, vision, which are related, which help to regulate the social, legal, domestic, and religious aspects of the life in a society. And the Vedic literature, which is there, can be divided into two parts. One is Shruti, that initially when the Veds were composed, they were composed in an oral format. They were not reduced to writing, and they were passed on from one person to another person, from one generation to another generation orally. And you cannot say attribute one particular author for a particular Ved. Whereas the suktas are collections of mantras or hymns. Those could be attributed to one or more rishis. But as far as Veds are concerned, no. And we have four Veds, that is the Rig Ved, which is the main source of information in detail, which deal with social, religious, political, and economic aspects of life in a society. Though it is said that there is no single author for a Ved, it is generally believed that there were 7 primary rishis who composed the Rig Veds. The Sam Ved, which was there, that contains verses which are almost entirely from the Rig Ved, but they have been arranged in a different format to facilitate chanting. Whereas the Yajurved, which is there, the mantras there are in the form of prose, and they have been borrowed and built on the foundation of verses in the Rig Ved. And they contain wisdom as far as sacrifices are concerned, and they have been conceived to meet the demands of ritualistic religion. The 3 Veds, that is Rig Ved, Sam Ved, and Yajur Ved, are also known as Traividya. Now, as far as Atharva Ved is concerned, which came up much later. Now, this was composed by rishis who were called Atharvans, and it has got more diverse hymns and which are simpler in language. The collection of hymns which are there, they represent a tradition of magico-religious rites, and they are believed to, remove the maladies caused by the demons at that time. More of that aspect slightly later. And these Veds are repositories of works containing not only religious ideas, but also related to knowledge of sciences and their applications. And the Veds are structured in 4 parts. Each Ved is structured in 4 parts. The first part is Samhita. The Samhita is a collection of hymns in saying praise of the Vedic gods. The next one is Brahmanas. Now, Brahmanas is distinct from the present day word which we call Brahmin. The Brahmanas are rituals. They are commentaries and explanations of proper methods and meanings of Vedic Samhita, that is the hymns and the rituals. The texts for rituals which are there, the texts which are there for the rituals, they prescribe guidelines for religious and everyday duties. Remember this thing, not only for rituals, but for everyday duties. The third part is Aranyaka, which are known as the forest texts. They serve as guide for meditation by sages who go to the forest to meditate and provide philosophical interpretation of rituals. And finally, each Ved has got a concluding part which is known as the Upanishad, which is the essence of the Vedic teaching. So this is how our Veds are composed. I thought before I start with the concept of knowledge management, we must know what is knowledge management, and what a slight introduction to Veds should be there. Now, how did the knowledge acquisition take place? Now, in the ancient area, when man had not yet thought of the concept of God, the man was at the mercy of the natural elements. Fire, rain, wind, air, what we call in Hindi, Agni, Indra, Marut, Vayu. So therefore, since there was nothing known as God, the man started worshipping these elements. And slowly, when our rishis meditated and continued, went deep into their meditations, they came upon the wisdom that is contained in the Veds. And those rishis were called mantra drashtas. Now, the Veds which have been created, since they have been created by the rishis, and the knowledge which is given to them has been revealed to them, they did not create this knowledge themselves. This knowledge, the Veds are therefore called Apurusha. And the meaning that the original knowledge that has come from one creator. And since the original Veds were composed orally, the Shruti element is believed to be given by the gods, whereas much later, during the later Vedic period, the Veds were reduced to writing, and that is how Simriti concept came in. Rishi Vedvyas is credited with having reduced the Veds to writing. And the various rishis which were there were, they had a hierarchy of Brahm Rishi, Dev Rishi, Raj Rishi, Maharishi. Brahm Rishis were the ultimate experts. Dev Rishis were celestial sages, and they distinguished by their knowledge of past, present, and future. Raj Rishis were Kshatriya Rishis, who were also kings, like King Janak. And Maharishis were the great rishis, as the name suggests, and they engaged in meditation for further creation of knowledge. Now, as far as knowledge retention was concerned, a very, very interesting part is that there was a tradition of passing on knowledge orally from one person to another or from one generation to another. A very, very systematic way of passing this information was devised. And almost for a millennium, 1 millennium, that is almost 1,000 years. Hello. हेलो
पता नहीं चलते चलते मेरा लैपटॉप क्या है पीछे से आवाज तो आ रही है लेकिन इसके कुछ भी नहीं
लोकेश म्यूट योरसेल्फ
hello and almost for 1,000 years this tradition of passing on the knowledge orally continued. Now if sociologically if we take one generation as 20 to 25 years, that means almost about 40 to 50 generations the knowledge or the content of the Veds was passed on orally from one generation to another without any distortion, without any dispute coming in as far as the contents were concerned. How did our rishis devise that method? We must realize this thing, that it is a very, very difficult thing. You try to pass on a message from one person to another and then that person passes, you must have seen that in the management techniques today, passing on information from one person to another and starting with one person, going to the 30th person, the whole message changes. But here, the content of the Veds passed on orally, such rich repository of knowledge passed on orally from one generation to another for almost 50 generations, lasting 1,000 years, did not result in any loss of fidelity. What they had done was, what the rishis had done was, they devised a mnemonic system to maintain the fidelity of the content. There were 11 different checks to ensure accuracy of the mantras when they were recited and conveyed from one person to another. The mantras were recited by one person and then they were checked based on 11 different parameters. And this system which they had devised is akin to the present day system of checksum and parity in our computer programming. A point to note here is that later, number of other texts in other religions came in, which also were composed orally and later reduced to writing, but they did not have this system of checks or checksum and parity, and with the result, there were a lot of contradictions, lot of disputes, and with the result, those religions bifurcated into various sects, depending upon who believed what. So our rishis perfected this technique of knowledge retention, which was there. Now, the most important aspect as far as knowledge dissemination is concerned, where we as teachers come in. Now, knowledge was imparted through the Gurukuls. That was as far as what equivalent to our school level education is concerned. But higher education was through Agraharas, Brahmana Sanghas, and Parishads. Agraharas and Brahmana Sanghas were equivalent to our higher education institutions, and Parishads were equivalent to our present day seminars or conferences and such as it is. The point to note here is that in that era, education was a philanthropic activity. A teacher never charged any money for providing knowledge. And they were actually gurus. They were knowledgeable. And they were held in high esteem. They were free of all materialistic inducements. Education in Gurukul started with a ceremony which was called Upnayana, and it lasted for about 10 to 12 years. And the first session used to be a performance of Sandhya with the chanting of Gayatri Mantra. And the whole system of education was through meditation and self-realization. Hello.
Hello.
Somebody speaking.
आप अपना म्यूट कर दीजिए.
Hello.
Hello. Hanji, sir. Please continue, sir.
So, in the Gurukuls, the learning was in 3 different stages. The first one was Sarvana, where, as the name implies, the student listened. He listened to the truth. He listened to the mantra. And that was based on the concept of Shruti. But he also memorized the mantras. Thereafter was the concept of Manana, that is the deliberation and reflection. He tried to understand the meaning of the mantra. He tried to comprehend that and try to imbibe that. Then was Nididhyasan, that is contemplation, comprehension, to get better insight to the meaning of the text. And here, Nididhyasan also means that there were a number of mantras which dealt with the same topic, but the mantras were different. The student was taught to try and evaluate what is the difference in the meaning of those mantras. So apart from comprehension, the student was able to analyze, he was able to evaluate as to what is contained in different mantra of dealing with the same topic. So, and thereafter, the student was also engaged in giving out his views or his commentary on different aspects of different Veds or the contents of the Veds. So just imagine the present day concept of Bloom's taxonomy, which talks about memorization, understanding, application of knowledge, and then analysis, evaluating, and creation. All those aspects were incorporated into the teaching learning process by our rishis more than 3,500 years ago. A very, very innovative arrangement which was there. And somehow the world is coming back to realize that that was actually the right way of carrying on with the teaching learning process. So a very, sound system of knowledge dissemination was conceived by our rishis. And the whole system of education the objective was to prepare students for life in this world and beyond, and realization and salvation of the soul. So that means religious teaching as well as preparing students for life, giving them vocational training, etc., formed part of the training. Please remember, later in India, in 1947, India became independent. In 1948, when Dr. Radhakrishnan submitted his report for improvement into the education system of Indian higher education system, he also started not only higher education, he talked about the whole education system. He also said that religious education should form part of the education of a student. Somehow that aspect we did not incorporate into our policies. Now, when the students were taught in the Gurukuls, their capacities for problem solving, critical thinking, and were developed, and emphasis was also laid on character formation, so that a student, when he came out of the Gurukul, he was fit enough, he could contribute to the society. The agraharas which were there, they were, different agraharas were set up by rishis, different rishis. Those were there for, each rishi started working on one particular aspect of a Ved, and they gave specialized knowledge. That they were there for higher education. And similarly, the Brahmana Sanghas were there. Those were assemblies of advanced learners for higher stages of learning. Interesting point was that unlike today, what is happening in India, that everybody who passes 12th standard then rushes to the universities or colleges. Over there, admission to higher education was always based on merit and aptitude. And the inclination of a student for quest of knowledge was assessed by the teachers or by the rishi there. And then only was the student admitted to the Sangha. And the tests were also conducted to assess his freedom from temptations of different types. That means the student was totally devoted to higher education, and then only he was admitted. Just imagine the same thing if we could apply now, that if a student has to go to engineering, we assess his aptitude for engineering. He wants to go for medicine, his aptitude for medicine, and similarly other professions. And there was a meritocracy prevailed, and there was no discrimination. There have been instances where even royals or princes were denied admission because they were not found fit to receive higher education. There were times when kings organized parishads where they invited learned rishis, philosophers, and renowned scholars to give discourses, and where people, the students came, or the other learned people came to enhance their knowledge. So the whole system which we are following today was a replica of that. Only thing is that today, the process of teaching, learning, the process of research which is there, those have got corrupted, and we need to bring them back to the system that had been devised during the Vedic era. Another aspect of the knowledge dissemination was that there were different institutions like Gurukuls, Agraharas, Brahmana Sanghas. Now, they were all autonomous. Their day-to-day functioning was based on self-regulation. The local communities helped them by providing them materialistic support, giving them rations, giving them clothing, etc. And similarly, the ruling elite, like kings, etc., they supported them by giving them endowments, etc. And at the end of the training, it was the teacher who decided whether the student has finished his training or learning process or not. This aspect is these days being followed in the Western universities, where a teacher teaches and then assesses the students. Somehow, in Indian universities, as yet, we cannot say that our teachers have got that maturity levels as well as academic integrity to assess the students independently. And that's why we have to go in for a system of centralized examinations. We have to go in for a system of control of examination and such other things. Now, as after a student passed out from a Gurukul, that is at the age of about 18 years, he was graded as Mahaprajanan, Madhyama Prajanan, and Alpa Prajanan. Mahaprajanan was a person who was fit enough to go for higher education. Madhyama Prajanan was a student who could go in for vocations, etc. And Alpa Prajanan was a person with lower intellectual capability and could be given a vocation of where lesser intensive skills were required. So a comprehensive system of teaching learning akin to the present day basic principles of Bloom's taxonomy and Edgar Dale's cone of learning had been devised by our rishis. Edgar Dale's cone of learning, I hope you all know, you are teachers, where he says that if you are teaching and if you are giving a lecture, the retention is 5%. You engage in discussion, then it is 20%. You give a demonstration, then it is 50%. And if a senior student teaches a junior student, then the retention is 95%. Now, those aspects were incorporated into the teaching learning processes by our rishis during that era, that is 3,500 years ago. And same thing is now coming back to us through the journals or academic journals which are there. And as far as knowledge creation was concerned, I talked about as to how in Gurukuls, the students were asked to provide commentary on whatever they have learned or the contents of Veds, etc. And the ashrams of different rishis which were there, they specialized in different texts of Vedas, and they helped in the knowledge creation process. Especially during the later Vedic period, a lot of texts were created, like Vedants, which were known as the limbs of the Vedas and helped to understand and interpret the Veds. we had Upveds, which dealt with the applied knowledge like Ayurveda, Dhanurved. Dhanurved dealt with military science. Gandharva Ved, which was dealing with fine arts or music, and Shilpa Ved, which dealt with vocational training, etc. And we had the sutras. Those were the new books dealing with new social customs. And then came the Dharma Shastras, where they dealt with laws and customs for interaction with the society. Our Manu Smriti is part of that. And they were Puranas, they were anonymous texts. We do not know who wrote those Puranas. And we have 18 Mahapuranas and 18 Puranas. And time, because of the paucity of time, I will not go into the details of that. Now, I talked about Upanishads, that they were the concluding parts of the Veds. Now, there are total 108 Upanishads that form part of the.
सविता जी, अश्विनी जी, आप अपना माइक म्यूट कर लीजिए. सविता जी, अश्विनी जी.
There were 108 Upanishads that were part of Muktika canons. And out of those, 95 were composed even after the later Vedic period. So during the Vedic period, only about 13 Upanishads had been created. So this was how the knowledge management took place. Another important aspect is the education of women. Now, our Veds gave exalted status and rights to women, and they were allowed to go to acquire imbibe education without any discrimination. Women enjoyed equal rights to receive education, and there were, number of rituals which had been devised in our Veds, which had to be jointly performed by husband and wife. So that indicates the status that our Veds wanted to give to women. And there were many women like Vishwara, Apala, Ghosha, who rose to the status of renowned rishis. And there is a Rishika known as Lopamudra, who's supposed to have composed 179 mantra or hymns, suktas for the Rig Veda. And Rig Veda mentions the name of many rishis. When I was going through different types of literature, I could find at least 30 different names. And the women who studied, they were divided into two categories. First category was Brahmavadnis. They were lifelong students of theology and philosophy. And like Gargi is one such Brahmavadini that the name comes to my mind. But these Brahmavadinis were also eligible to get married, and equally learned bridegrooms were found for them. Whereas there were Sadyodvahas, they only studied till their marriage or their pubescent age of about 16 to 19 years of age. And after that, they settled down in matrimony. Now, all this exalted status for the women continued till about 300 of BC, the same. Thereafter, during that later Vedic period, the later half of the later Vedic period, the women were debarred from education and the decline of the society also started. So let's see what happened during the later Vedic period. The Vedas were reduced to writing, converted into the written form. And many Upanishads came in during that period. Another important aspect was that emphasis as far as teaching learning process shifted from meditation and study of Veds to rituals. The yajna replaced meditation, and a number of procedures were prescribed for the same, with the result from intellectual development of intellectual ability, more of recitation, more of memorization, that was gained emphasis. And the advent of Manu Smriti resulted in only the higher the Brahmins being permitted to go in for higher education. Even the lower castes like Vaishyas and Kshatriyas were not allowed to go in for higher education, and they were content basically to learning about their own vocation, etc. And as far as Shudras were concerned, they were totally debarred from getting any type of education. So therefore, the religion got reduced to complicated rituals, which were performed by Brahmins in a language that was not understood by anybody. More than that, the women and lower castes, they were debarred from education. Why the women were debarred? One was the concept of Manu Simriti. The second aspect was that the Greeks, Alexander, he invaded India in 326 BC. And after he went back, number of Greeks stayed back in India. And the Indian parents did not want their daughters to be exposed to the Greek culture. So they also tried to ensure that women were not allowed to go out of their households. So number of factors conspired to debar women from education. This was, and moment you do that, debar women from education, society degenerates. Now with this type of thing happening, resurrection had to take place. Whatever goes up has to come down, but something else takes its place. And that is how the Buddhist and Jain systems of education came up. There were certain features in these two systems which were common. This system of education started around 500 BC through Buddhist viharas or monasteries and Jainalayas. The aim of education of both the systems was same: salvation through wisdom and preparing the students for life. Though the system initially started working for preparing monks who would work in the monasteries and impart knowledge, and they will give religious discourses, but they also paid attention to mass education. The students who joined the viharas and Jainalayas to become monks, the curriculum for them was different. But then there were students who were also admitted to viharas and Jainalayas, but then they were given different education. The curriculum was different for them, making them fit for day-to-day working of the society. So, a combination of both, people going in for higher learning, people going in for day-to-day working, vocational education, that was the thing. Another development during the Buddhist and Jain system of education was the change in paradigm of the system of education. During the Vedic era, one teacher taught one student. It was one-on-one type of teaching learning process. Whereas during the Buddhist and the Jain systems, a classroom system of imparting education came up. However, the pedagogy remained the same. That is memorization, learning from the religious scriptures, learning through discussions, learning through experience, that experiential learning, such other things. The system was inclusive. Initially, when the Buddhist system started, initially they did not permit women to join the viharas. But later, a disciple of Gautam Buddha, he prevailed upon him that even women should be permitted to receive education. So separate viharas for women were set up. And in the case of Jain system, women were permitted right from day one. There were no caste barriers. People from all castes were admitted, were entitled to receive educations. And there were no place for yajna. That was a major departure from the Vedic system. And the Buddhist system rather flourished very well, and they set up number of renowned universities like Nalanda, Vikramshila, Udantapuri, and such other things. There were number of such universities which have came up, and they worked based on the corporate governance principle, which is being followed by a number of universities today, even in the West. So certain peculiar features of Buddhist systems and Jain systems which were there. The Buddhist system was based on the three Pitakas. They were, Pitakas were, this thing, their texts, which were divided into three parts. The first part was known as the Sutras, which were the tales that emphasize meditation. The Vinay, another part, Vinay, which was the precepts that signify discipline, and Abhidhamma, which were commentaries that dwell upon wisdom. Now, these three Pitakas which were there, they were later supplemented by Milinda Panha, which was basically a dialogue between a King Mahendra and a monk known as Nagarsena, whereas something akin to what Lord Krishna and Arjun went through. Same way, the king asked the question and the monk replied. The teaching of Buddhist system was based on their religious principles of Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. And very interestingly, when the students studied and their aim was to seek enlightenment as far as the religious education was concerned, there were three different categories. One was known as Arhat, Bodhisattva, and Buddha. Arhat could be considered equivalent to our present day undergraduate degree. Bodhisattva could be is equivalent to our present day postgraduate degree, and Buddha equivalent to our doctorate degree. Now, education was not only limited to Buddhist viharas. There were also Vidva Sabhas, which were assemblies of renowned scholars, and Ekant Sadhana, where the scholar sat down and meditated quietly. The discussions which took place were, they were based on evidence which one person who was discussing with other, which produced, and the evidence was classified differently. One was Siddhant, basically that is principle. Hetu was reasoning. Udaharan was example. Sadharma was what is written in your religion. And then Vedharma, which was something, a contradiction based on of what is written there, based on analysis. Pratyaksh, that means something which is obvious. Anuman, which is you draw inferences, etc. And Agamba, which was induction or generation or giving rise to, or something which emerges. Just imagine, same way in the present era, when we are carrying out research, we have a primary source, secondary source of information, tertiary source of information. Just imagine 3,000 years ago, our ancestors had devised a system of classification of the evidence which a learned person produces to put across his point of view. And the system encouraged the concept of how to think. We these days we talk that the Indian system is basically oriented towards what to think, and we want the system of how to think this thing to be incorporated in our teaching learning process. That was the thing which was there in our this thing. Buddhist system also set up a system of summer schools where the monks, they went out to teach, but returned back to the viharas during the rainy season to learn something more, to refresh their knowledge. And this thing. Now this system of summer schools is now catching up in our universities. It is prevalent in Western universities quite recently. Now, as far as the Jain system is concerned, an interesting feature is Lord Mahavir in the 600 BC, he was born there, is our 24th Tirthankar. there were 23 Tirthankar prior to him. And Rig Ved mentions about at least 3 previous Tirthankars, indicating that the Jain religion is the ancient religion in India. The ancient texts were known as Agams, and the concept of knowledge, they say that you acquire knowledge when you shun pride, you shun anger, and you shun greed. And they said that the knowledge could be through 5 instruments like sensory, scriptural, clairvoyance, omniscience, and which were based on the 5 O's of Ahimsa, Satya, Asatya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. Aparigraha was non-possession. You know, the monks were not allowed to own anything, not even clothes. They went out begging. Concept of humility was propagated both by the Buddhist and Jain system of education, and they did not permit anybody to own a property, whether it was movable or immovable. And the Jainalayas had basadis attached to them, which were residential quarters, and which later joined the mutts. They also constructed a lot of adopted number of caves, which were known as lainas, and they acted as centers of learning. The knowledge was imparted in local languages and Sanskrit. Very interesting feature here. The Buddhist education system was based on Pali language, which was the spoken language of that era. But they also insisted on Sanskrit. Basically, and apart from the Buddhist literature, they also went in for the study of Veds, so that a student gets the benefit of comparative study of philosophical thoughts and logic of the 2 systems. And in the Jain system, there were libraries which were attached to various mutts, and they started a very interesting system of Granthadam. If somebody wanted to donate something, he was asked to copy a particular text and distribute that copy amongst the people. If a person was unable to copy himself or did not have the wherewithal to do that, he could pay money and ask somebody else to copy the text on his behalf and then distribute. You know, just see the concept of knowledge sharing, which was adopted by the Jains. Perhaps something equivalent, we are trying to do that through InflibNet or something. And discussion, you know, after all, you listen something, you memorize something, and then you engage in student engaged in discussions. That was the main means of learning, apart from the experiential learning. The Taksha Shastra, that is the system or Shastra which talk about how the discussions had to be taking place. That talked about 4 different titles for the people who argued. First was Wadi Kolahal. The arguer, he हिंदी में कहता हूँ, वो अपने opponent में कोलाहल मचा देगा, Wadi Kolahal. Second one was Prativadi Bhayankara, the one who was a terror to his opponents who were arguing with. Wadi Raja, a king of arguing. And then was Wadibha Simba, that is a lion of arguers. The teachers were known as Pancha Parmeshthis, both rather in Vedic system, Buddhist system, and Jain system. The teacher were given an exalted status. It was the highest pedestal at which a person could be placed. And there were instances even when kings rose up from their thrones when a teacher entered the court. And there was a hierarchy of teachers in the Jain system of education, that is Arhat, Siddha, and Acharya. And there were subject teachers who were known as Upadhyayas. Now, the Jain system also had the Acharyas moving from one place to another, what we call the guest faculty, and going around and teaching. and they had number of assistants with them who were known as gachas. And they also devised a system of sramanas, a system of wandering monks. This was devised to maintain close contact with the masses. Interesting feature of the Jain system was that they had women there in their Jainalayas, and the learned women were known as Ajis or Kantis. And they played a significant role in knowledge dissemination. They moved from place to place. In the evenings, they used to have their sabhas where they narrated stories, basically with the aim of imparting education. So a very, very well devised system of education took shape after the decline of the Vedic system of education through the Buddhist and Jain system of education. And we need to implement those. And the Vedic system also responded later in the first millennium through temple schools and other. About that later some other day. Now, what is the relevance of the Vedic education in the present era as to what we could learn? First of all, providing education was considered a philanthropic activity, and which we now, there is a debate raging whether providing education is a public good or a private good. In the ancient era, it was considered a public good. The teachers were gurus, they were knowledgeable, free of materialistic inducements, and a teacher only decided when a student was fit enough to pass and what grade to be given to the student. We need to reach that level. That is the system being adopted by different universities now. Point is, will we have gurus? I was talking to a lady by the name Dr. Indira Parekh. She was a dean in Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. And as far as liberal education was concerned, which is being propagated by the National Education Policy 2020, she made a very pregnant statement that only a guru can adopt liberal education. Now, my point is our faculty prepared to work hard to become a guru? Academic institutions were autonomous and nurtured by community and the ruling elite. Now here, somehow, our local community has totally detached themselves from our academic institutions. Academic institutions are there, which are being governed by the regulators and the government, but the local community is not at all involved. There is a requirement for that. And similarly, the ruling elite has to ensure that autonomy of the institutions is maintained. And we have to ensure that meritocracy and inclusivity form part of this thing. We have to ensure that the aim of the education should be to prepare students for life, which, if you talk about the present era, preparing them for change, complexity, change, and diversity. And the pedagogy that we have to follow should encourage critical thinking, experiential learning, exploration. You give a question to a student, he comes back with the answer, you counter him with another question, he goes back to explore and such other things. And learning by curiosity. This aspect is totally missing in our system of education. I'll give you a simple example. We are all here as teachers. How many of us know why is PhD, the degree is known as Doctorate of Philosophy, not called DPH, and why is it called PhD? Similarly, we write blogs. Why is it called a blog? We keep talking about cloud computing. Why is it called cloud computing? Why not sun computing or moon computing? That system of curiosity has totally gone away from our teaching learning process. Then we have to go by the outcome-based education, and the students should be assigned tasks. After school education, everybody should not be rushing to the universities or colleges. there should be different avenues though, which should open out for them, like vocational education. Admission to higher education should be based on aptitude, inclination, and inclination to acquire knowledge. Now, if you notice, what is our system of admission to the doctoral level programs? It is based on a test which just basically tests the memory. We don't have a system of a person writing down his statement of purpose as to why he wants to do his post-graduation or why he wants to do his doctorate. We just admit students based on the marks obtained. Now, that is not inclination or aptitude for research. Now, that was a system which was adopted during our Vedic period. And we need to adopt a structured approach for knowledge creation and encourage activities like parishads and summer schools. And women education needs to be given due importance. And most important, hello, just a minute.
Please mic mute कर लीजिए. Please mic mute कर लीजिए.
And we need to encourage
Anand Kumar ji.
And we need to encourage the concept of knowledge sharing. At the moment, at present, our elite institutions, which we call institution of excellence at the national level, they don't engage with the normal institutions which are there. I will say that somehow we have created a caste system in our educational institutions. There are high-class Brahmins like IITs, IIMs, certain things, and then there is a caste hierarchy amongst different types. And there is no knowledge sharing taking place. If it is taking place also, it is very, very minimal, just for the namesake. We need to adopt this system of knowledge creation. The point which I'm trying to make is that our national heritage had devised a very efficient system of knowledge management. Somehow we have to get back to our basics and adopt this system of knowledge management, which was prevailing during the Vedic era, and we need to bring it back into the present era. Thank you very much. I hope I haven't overshot my time.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir. मैडम अनम्यूट कर लीजिए अपने आप को, लक्ष्मी मैडम.
Yes. Hi, Lokesh.
हाँ जी, आपकी आवाज आ रही मैडम, आप शुरू.
हाँ, क्वेश्चंस कुछ पूछने हैं, कोई लोग पूछेंगे क्वेश्चंस?
एक क्वेश्चन चैट बॉक्स में है मैडम, आप उन्हीं को देख लीजिए या मैं बोल दूं आपको?
हाँ, आप पढ़ दो.
मैं पढ़.
हाँ.
अनामिका दुबे का एक सवाल है. सर, यू हैव गिवन अस वेरी वैल्यूएबल इंफॉर्मेशन. I have a query. As you mentioned that during later Vedic period, women were denied to get education because of Manusmriti. Was there any central system in Bharat during that period that Manusmriti was applied to whole?
What I will say is that, that was not an era where we could talk about a central system or the system at the local level. It was a system of customs, local customs, which was generated, and the society responded according to that. And so when the Manusmriti came in and they said that women are to be debarred from education, so the society started following that. And as I told you, that the local conditions also were such that the Greek had settled down in our part of the country, and their alien culture was not very congruent with the Indian culture. So parents were a little apprehensive. So the Manusmriti, as well as the local environmental conditions, resulted in women being debarred from receiving education.
संजय जी, कोई सवाल है?
Yes, sir.
Lokesh, I had added a question to this question. Could you read that too, please?
मैडम, आप पूछ लीजिए, डायरेक्ट पूछिए.
Sir, along with this along with what you just told us. What happened? What happened all of a sudden to a creation of hierarchy where there was a lot of marginalized, apart from women, suddenly the untouchables were not permitted, and there was an entire hierarchy to which education was allowed and the others were left out. What happened?
No, it was not all of a sudden. It happened gradually. See, the system, the early Vedic period lasted for almost 1000 years. And over a period, some sort of degeneration in the system took place. And with the result, the Vedic system of education imploded. And that is how the Buddhist and the Jain system of education came. It was not a sudden, all of a sudden it happened. It was a gradual process, slowly it happened. You know, slowly we shifted from a system of meditation to reciting of mantras without understanding the meaning. So that from intellectual level, we came down to memorization and reciting the mantras. It was over a period of time, and people did not understand even the meaning of those mantras. So only the Brahmins recited those mantras.
There has to be a valid reason. There have to be something substantial for such a massive degradation to take place. And unless we go into those reasons, we will not be able. This is my understanding as a student, that unless we actually place emphasis on the understanding of those reasons which brought society and the society, pedagogy and delivery of education to that level, we will not be able to do anything, because we cannot go back to something if we don't know how it slid away.
Yeah, if you see our Veds, a lot of emphasis was given to rituals and other aspects. Now, what happens is performing rituals was easier than intellectual activities. And over a period of time, because of emphasis on rituals, the intellectual activities took a backseat. And it was not a sudden thing. Over a period of time, the ritual aspects of our Veds took precedence over the other aspects. However, your point is valid. Some more research could be carried out as to why this happened.
Because it is very dangerous in today's times to paint a very bright and rosy pink picture without trying to understand that we are also, just like we are inheritors of that legacy, we are also the inheritors of a destroyed legacy. Yes. And if we had a role in that, we also have a role in this.
That is what I'm trying to say.
From that point of view, a caution is very necessary.
So what I'm trying to say is that, we shifted from a system of intellectual activity to basically to rote memorization and recitation, which was a major cause of the degradation of the system.
एक और सवाल, ज्यादा से ज्यादा एक सवाल बस। संजय जी आपका? हाँ जी
सर, ये हमेशा से एक विवाद का मुद्दा रहा है कि हम हमारे पास्ट को ज्यादा बेहतर समझे या हमारे वर्तमान को, और इसके ऊपर पूरा आइडिया, एक बहुत डेलिब्रेशन हमेशा से होता रहा है। और राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति को हम देखें तो राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति भी इस बात को मानती है कि बहुत कुछ अच्छा हमारे इतिहास में था, खासतौर पर वैदिक समय में, सनातन समय में रहा है। और अगर हम उसी सनातन समय को, अगर हम उस कंसेप्ट को, अगर या उस पूरी की पूरी अवधारणा को समझते हुए राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति को देखें तो 3 बड़ी जगह पर वो उन बातों को देखना चाहते हैं जो हमारे प्राचीन इतिहास में बहुत बेहतर तरीके से काम कर रही थी, खासतौर पर मेथोडोलॉजी को लेकर। जो टीचिंग मेथोडोलॉजी वो उसके लिए गुरुकुल सिस्टम की बात कर रही होती है। पर आश्चर्यजनक रूप से सर 2 बातें हैं जिस पर मैं आपका ध्यान दिलाना चाहूंगा, वो ये कि राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति इस बात की बात करती है कि हमें व्यक्ति निर्माण नहीं करना बल्कि नागरिक निर्माण करना है, जबकि सनातन संस्कृति का ये बड़ा पहलू था कि हम व्यक्ति निर्माण करेंगे और व्यक्ति का जो दायरा है वो किसी समाज विशेष से ना हो कि वो बहुत ही वैश्विक दायरा होगा, और नागरिक निर्माण करते हैं तो वो दायरा उतना ही सिमट जाता है। व्हेन यू आर पॉइंट आउट द सिटीजनशिप, तो एक तो सवाल ये। दूसरा मामला ये था कि शिक्षा नीति इस बात की बात करती है कि हम 64 विद्याओं में निपुण व्यक्ति का निर्माण करेंगे या समाज का निर्माण करेंगे। और अगर हम इन 64 विद्याओं के बारे में जिक्र करते हैं तो मैं ये मानता हूं कि शायद आधुनिक समाज में या सभ्य कहे जाने वाले समाज में उन 64 कलाओं को हम स्वीकार नहीं कर सकते। जैसे जुआ खेलना भी एक कला थी, द्रुत कला के रूप में जाना गया। चोरी ये भी एक कला है, चोरी करना भी एक कला थी। ये 64 कलाओं की बात थी। और ये 64 कलाएं, ये 64 शिक्षा जिसके बारे में बात की, 64 कौशलों की जो बारे में बात की, ये तमाम वो कौशल हैं जिस पर आप बिना विवेक के, बिना संज्ञान में लिए आप उन्हें अपने व्यवहार में दिखा सकते हैं। जैसे मान लीजिए कि अगर मान लीजिए कोई सर्कस में काम करने वाला कोई भी जानवर है, तो वो भी कुछ कलाएं सीख जाता है, वो करतब सीख जाता है। तो हम 21वीं सदी के लिए क्या हम ऐसे कारगर कामगार बनाना चाहते हैं जो कुछ खास तरह के कौशलों का निर्माण करें, या ऐसे सजग प्राणी के रूप में बनकर करना चाहते हैं? और अगर उस सजग प्राणी का निर्माण होगा तो वो इन 64 कलाओं के माध्यम से नहीं हो सकता।
Can I answer?
जी सर।
May I answer now? Now, first of all, I would like to differ with you that our national education, pardon me, my Hindi is not that strong jitni aapki hai. So, if you permit me, can I speak in English?
Yes, sir.
What I would like to say is I would like to differ that national education policy is giving precedence to preparing students for citizenship rather than intellectual ability. National education policy is talking about all-round development of personality of the student, and they lay emphasis on liberal education. The national education policy is laying emphasis on liberal education, and liberal education is nothing else but preparing a student for life. And for life does not mean only worldly matters, but it also means preparing him intellectually. This is one aspect. But however, once he is prepared intellectually, he also gets prepared to become a good, productive citizen for that. Now, the most important aspect where the national education policy falters is the this thing, which is the most critical change agent, which is supposed to be there, which will bring about that change in our education system. And that critical change agent is the teachers. How do we ensure that our teachers, who are products of a teacher and examination centric system, adopt a learning centric approach? They become gurus, they become knowledgeable. Now, our national education policy is totally silent on that. Kasturi Rangan committee report, which was there, that gave a lot of emphasis on that. And I think a sustained pragmatic campaign has to be launched to as far as the capacity building of the teachers is concerned. Your 2 points, rather, gambling and stealing, these parts were also Shilpa. Yes, I totally agree. Gambling and stealing were, you need to teach that. Now, what is gambling? It is basically what we are trying to teach is risk taking. Now, we have to teach our students to prepare to become good citizens. And when we have to tell them what is the difference between a risk and a gamble. A risk is that you try something and that things could not go the way you wanted it to go. But then you will have control over the consequences. Whereas gamble is something that you take a decision, and things, if they go wrong, you will not be able to control the consequences. So the present system of education has to teach our students the concept of risk taking. If you want them to become good entrepreneurs, they have to learn the art of risk taking. but then they must understand the difference between a risk and a gamble. And same thing is stealing. How do you prepare a student for war? How do you prepare? When I say war, it does not mean just going and firing bullets, etc. You need to have people there who will go and work for your national cause. And they may have to go and get information from other sources. Sometimes the information is available directly. Sometimes they may have to resort to means which are not direct. So perhaps, yes. Now, when stealing is there, if it is for personal good, it is bad. But if it is for the sake of the nation, yes, it is permissible. Yeah, and you have to train people for that. Your law is doing that. So the national education policy is doing a lot about the education, but there are certain major flaws. And the biggest flaw is the capacity building of the teachers. It hasn't devoted much, paid much attention to that. And that is the most critical change agent, and that is the weakest link as far as our education system is concerned. We have to convert our teachers into gurus.
बहुत धन्यवाद सर। शिक्षण और प्रशिक्षण का मामला है, शिक्षण इम्पोर्टेंट, ये प्रशिक्षण सवाल यहाँ पर है हमारा कि हम ट्रेनिंग दे रहे हैं और टीचिंग्स। मैं मैडम लक्ष्मीवत से कहूँगा कि अब कार्यक्रम का धन्यवाद ज्ञापन कर सके। बहुत धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Lokesh. On behalf of Madam Principal, our entire team, and on my own behalf, I express our sincere gratitude to Brigadier Dr. R.S. Grewal, sir, for accepting our request to enlighten us and leaving us all with conceptual clarity on the subject of great national relevance. Knowledge imparted to us on our traditional knowledge makes us feel proud of our heritage. Sir, hearing you was like being under your tutelage. We wish we could go on and on. Sir, your views and thoughts so kindly shared by you with us would enable us to break some shackles of ignorance and add to the existing fund of our knowledge on the subject matter of the FDP. Teachers at large would benefit in greater measure as they are on the threshold of their professional career advancement. Sir, it is very difficult to express our gratitude to you in words for the valuable time spared by you to be amidst us. Your presence has graced the FDP with value and the meaning that it deserves. You would always remain our inspiration to motivate us to excel in our professional work and conduct, to prove an asset to ourselves, our employer, and our profession. With utmost humbleness, we say thank you, sir. And one thing more about Professor Balaganpati, sir. I have had the benefit of hearing some lectures delivered by Professor Dr. Balaganpati Devarakonda, sir, from University of Delhi. And I also had the benefit of running through some of his publications. If one reads and understands just one of his publications, one would understand the rich fund of wisdom that he possesses. His lectures and publications, his theory and practice lead him to be amongst the leading philosophers of Asian subcontinent. Now, Madam Principal, supremacy on multifarious topics of concern in academic institutions is rare. Rarest of rare is also present amidst us. The sheer volume of her value of her publication is simply mind-boggling. As we all know, she is Professor Dr. Harpreet Kaur, our learned Madam Principal. Madam Principal, a million thanks to you for your support. Heartiest congratulations, honored Principal Madam, for being awarded the Great Indian Teachers Award, the Great Indian Women's Award by Lead Global Enclave 2021. We are all proud of you and your constant pursuit of excellence.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let's Sangeeta
Thank you,
Pathak.
Lakshmi. It's not required. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mahatma Gandhi. IQAC Mata Sundari College महात्मा गांधी काशी विद्यापीठ और टीएलसी डॉक्टर हरि सिंह गौर केंद्रीय विश्वविद्यालय की ओर से आयोजित इस साप्ताहिक संकाय संवर्धन कार्यक्रम में आप सबका धन्यवाद। अगला सत्र 3:30 बजे शुरू होगा। डॉक्टर रेखा नवनीत जी उस सत्र में रहेंगी। इसके बाद प्रोफेसर हरीश अरोड़ा का सेशन है 4:30 बजे। आशा करता हूँ आप सब 3:30 बजे और 4:30 बजे जुड़ेंगे। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर का, बहुत धन्यवाद तीनों ही संस्थाओं की ओर से। बहुत धन्यवाद।
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.